I never thought my career would lead me to the deepest, most forbidden sections of the Vatican. My name is Father Marcus Bellini, and for the past 3 years, I've served as one of only 7 priests authorized to clean and maintain the demon containment cells beneath St. Peter's Basilica. The job posting called it specialized custodial work in restricted archives. They didn't mention the screaming, they didn't mention the scratching that never stops, and they certainly didn't mention the 4 rules that stand between me and something far worse than death. The cells exist 6 levels below the public catacombs, accessible only through a reinforced door hidden behind a false wall in the Apostolic Archive. Cardinal Tossetti himself escorted me down on my first day, his weathered hands trembling as he gripped the iron key that hung from his neck. The descent takes exactly 11 minutes if you walk at a steady pace. The temperature drops 3 degrees with each level. By the time you reach the 6th floor, you can see your breath hanging in the air like frozen prayers. There are 43 cells in total, arranged in a perfect circle around a central altar that predates Christianity itself. Each cell is sealed with doors made from blessed iron, inscribed with scripture in languages that haven't been spoken for millennia. The Vatican doesn't call them prisoners. They call them the detained. I call them exactly what they are: demons trapped in vessels of human flesh that stopped being truly human decades, sometimes centuries ago. Cardinal Tossetti handed me a leather journal on that first day. The pages were yellowed and stiff, filled with handwriting from dozens of different people. Some entries were in Latin, others in Italian, a few in languages I couldn't identify. But the first page was in English, recently added, and it contained the 4 rules that every cleaner must follow without exception. Rule 1. Never enter the cells alone. Always maintain visual contact with your partner. If you lose sight of them for more than 30 seconds, leave the level immediately and report to the Cardinal's office. The rules seemed straightforward enough. My partner was Father Domenico, a gaunt man in his 60s who had been cleaning the cells for 22 years. He rarely spoke, and when he did, his voice carried the weight of someone who had seen things that fundamentally broke something inside him. During our first shift together, he explained why this rule existed. In 1987, 2 cleaners entered cell 19 together, he whispered as we prepared our supplies. One turned his back for less than a minute to retrieve a mop. When he turned around, his partner was gone. They found him 3 days later in cell 7, which had been empty when they started their shift. He was curled in the corner, all his fingernails torn out, his eyes gouged from their sockets. He had done it to himself, and he was smiling. Domenico's eyes never left mine as we worked. Even when cleaning opposite sides of a cell, he would stop every few seconds to verify my position. I learned to do the same. The detained ones would sometimes try to distract you, whispering your name from corners where no one stood, creating sounds that made you want to turn away from your partner. We never did. Rule 2. If a detained one speaks to you directly, using your name, do not respond. Do not acknowledge them in any way. Continue your work in complete silence until you exit the cell. This rule is harder than it sounds. The things in those cells know things they shouldn't know. In my second week, while cleaning cell 23, the thing inside spoke with my dead mother's voice. It knew details about my childhood that I had never told anyone. It knew about the accident that took her life. It knew the last words I said to her before she died, words I've never spoken aloud because the shame still burns inside me. Marcus, it said in her exact voice, the voice I hear in my dreams. Marcus, baby, I forgive you. I know you didn't mean it. I know you were angry, but I forgive you, sweetheart. Just look at me. Just let me see your face one more time. My hands shook so badly I dropped the scrub brush. Tears streamed down my face. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around, to see her one more time, to receive the forgiveness I had desperately needed for 15 years. But Domenico grabbed my shoulder hard enough to bruise. He shook his head once, his eyes pleading with me to remember the rule. I didn't turn around. I didn't speak. I finished cleaning that cell in silence while the thing wearing my mother's voice slowly transformed its pleas into threats, then into screams of rage that made my ears ring. When we finally left, I vomited in the corridor for 10 minutes straight. Domenico told me later that the detained one in cell 23 had been there since 1654. It had been a woman once, accused of infanticide and demonic possession in a small village near Naples. The church tried exorcism 47 times. Each attempt failed. Eventually, they brought her here. She had spent 370 years learning how to hurt people with words alone. Rule 3, never touch the detained ones, even if they appear injured or in distress. Never accept anything they offer to you, even if it appears to be a religious item. This rule broke Father Augustine. I never met him, but his final entry in the journal is dated just 6 months before I started. His handwriting is shaky, deteriorating into illegible scrawls by the end. According to his account, he was cleaning cell 31 when he noticed the detained one appeared to be choking. The man's face had turned purple, his hands clawing at his throat, eyes bulging in genuine distress. Father Augustine's medical training overrode his caution. He rushed forward to perform the Heimlich maneuver. The moment he touched the detained one, he felt something enter him through his hands. He described it as liquid ice flowing backward through my veins, something ancient and hungry settling into the empty spaces of my soul. He finished his shift, said nothing to his partner, and went home. Over the next 3 weeks, Father Augustine documented his deterioration. He stopped sleeping. He developed an uncontrollable hunger for raw meat. He began hearing voices speaking in Aramaic, a language he had never studied but suddenly understood perfectly. His final entry simply reads, "It's not sharing my body anymore. We've become the same thing, and it's so hungry. I'm taking my life tonight before I hurt someone. May God have mercy on what I've become." They found him in his quarters the next morning. He had drunk an entire bottle of consecrated wine laced with rat poison. But that wasn't what killed him. The autopsy revealed that his internal organs had been systematically consumed from the inside, replaced with something the coroner described as biological material not consistent with human anatomy. Father Augustine had been dead for at least a week before his body finally stopped moving. The detained one in cell 31 still occasionally pretends to choke. Domenico warned me about this on my first day. We watch it happen, and we do nothing. That's the rule. Rule 4. If the lights in the corridor begin to flicker, stop all work immediately. Return to the elevator and count to 100 before pressing any buttons. If you reach 100 and the lights are still flickering, you must wait in the elevator until they stop, regardless of how long it takes. The lights flickered for the first time during my 8th month. Domenico and I were cleaning cell 15 when the fluorescent tubes in the corridor began their stuttering dance. He dropped everything instantly, grabbed my arm, and pulled me toward the elevator with an urgency that terrified me. We made it inside with seconds to spare. The elevator doors closed, and Domenico began counting aloud in Latin. His voice was steady, but sweat poured down his face. I had never seen him so frightened. "What happens if we don't follow this rule?" I whispered when he reached 37. He didn't answer until he finished counting to 100. The lights continued their epileptic flickering. We stood in that elevator for 47 minutes. Domenico never took his eyes off the closed doors. When the lights finally stabilized, he told me about Father Chen. In 2003, Father Chen and his partner ignored the flickering lights. They decided to finish cleaning their assigned cell before returning to the elevator. It only took them 5 additional minutes. When they emerged into the corridor, they discovered that cell 43 had been opened, the cell that is never, under any circumstances, supposed to be opened, the cell whose door is welded shut and covered with lead plates inscribed with prayers of binding, the cell that isn't listed in any official Vatican documentation. Father Chen's partner survived, though he never spoke again. They found him curled beneath the central altar, his hair turned completely white, fingernails digging so deep into his own scalp that he had exposed portions of his skull. Father Chen was never found, but sometimes during the flickering you can hear someone screaming in the direction of cell 43. The screams sound like they're coming from very far away, or perhaps from very deep inside something. The journal contains 17 pages dedicated to analyzing what the flickering means. The general consensus is that it represents a moment when the barriers between our world and wherever these things truly come from grows thin. The detained ones become more active during these periods, more dangerous, more present in ways that reality struggles to contain. I once asked Cardinal Tassetti why the Church keeps these things here instead of attempting to destroy them. His answer chilled me more than anything I had encountered in the cells. "We tried, Father Bellini. In the early days, we tried everything: exorcism, holy water, consecrated fire. But these things cannot be destroyed, only contained. They are fundamental forces given shape and consciousness, aspects of darkness that have existed since before God spoke light into being. If we were to somehow succeed in destroying their vessels, we would release them fully into our world. Better they remain locked in flesh and iron, separated from the realm they seek to corrupt." Every detained one has a story. Cell 7 contains Lucia, possessed in 1823 after opening a grimoire discovered in the ruins of a pagan temple. Cell 12 holds Father Matthias, a priest who broke during the Black Plague and made a bargain with something that answered his desperate prayers. Cell 19 contains the thing that calls itself Andreas, though everyone knows that isn't the name of the consciousness that wears his body like a suit. The thing in cell 19 is special. Even Domenico won't enter that cell. When it's time to clean 19, we request special dispensation to skip it. Usually, the Cardinal agrees. The cell only gets cleaned once a year, and it requires a team of 5 priests working in perfect synchronization. I was curious once. I asked Domenico why cell 19 required such special treatment. He showed me a photograph from 1961. 3 priests had entered the cell for routine cleaning. The photograph, taken by a 4th priest who remained in the corridor, shows all 3 men standing motionless in the center of the cell, their backs to the camera. The detained one is visible in the corner, smiling. Nothing appears wrong in the photograph at first glance, but if you look closely, you realize all 3 priests are standing in exactly the same position, their heads tilted at exactly the same angle, and their shadows on the floor don't match their body positions. The shadows appear to be holding hands, forming a circle around the detained one. All 3 priests were found dead in their quarters the next morning, arranged in a circle, holding hands. They had been dead for approximately 72 hours, though they had been seen alive and working throughout that entire period. Whatever had been walking around in their bodies for those 3 days wasn't them. The deeper you work in the cells, the more you realize that the 4 rules aren't comprehensive. They're just the absolute minimum needed for survival. There are dozens of unwritten guidelines, observations passed down through whispered conversations and hastily scribbled journal entries. Never work in the cells on February 29th during a leap year. The barriers are weakest then. Never clean cell 28 while wearing red. The detained one there has an inexplicable reaction to that color. If you hear singing in Latin coming from an empty cell, leave the level immediately and don't return for at least 6 hours. If you smell roses in a corridor where no flowers exist, hold your breath until the scent fades. But the 4 main rules are absolute. Break them, and you'll end up as another cautionary tale in the journal, another name added to the memorial plaque hidden in the Cardinal's office that lists every cleaner who has died or disappeared in service to this terrible duty. Last month, something happened that isn't in the rules. Something that makes me question whether we truly understand what we're dealing with down there. Domenico and I were cleaning cell 37 when all 43 detained ones began speaking simultaneously, not to us, to each other, in a language that made my teeth ache and my vision blur. The sound was overwhelming, a cacophony of voices that seemed to vibrate in my bones. We followed protocol. We left immediately, locked the level, and reported to Cardinal Tossetti. He went pale when we described what happened. He disappeared into the restricted section of the Apostolic Archive and didn't emerge for 6 hours. When he finally called us to his office, he looked like he had aged 10 years. He placed an ancient manuscript on the desk between us. The pages were so old, they were nearly transparent. "This hasn't happened in 300 years, he said quietly. "The last time, it preceded the Great Lisbon earthquake. The detained ones were communicating, coordinating. We don't know what they were planning, but afterward, 30,000 people died in a matter of minutes." He closed the manuscript carefully, his hands trembling. "They're preparing for something. We need to increase security, add additional binding prayers to the cells, and implement new protocols." "New rules?" I asked. He shook his head slowly. "The 4 rules have kept cleaners alive for over 200 years, but I fear they may not be enough for what's coming. The detained ones are changing, becoming more organized, more purposeful. We may need to consider measures that the Church has previously deemed too extreme." He never elaborated on what those measures might be, but I've noticed changes since that day. More priests have been assigned to the deeper levels. The Cardinal himself now conducts weekly inspections, and they've begun construction on something in the center of the circular chamber around the ancient altar. None of the cleaners are allowed to ask questions about it. I've been having nightmares. In them, I'm standing in the corridor while all 43 cell doors slowly swing open simultaneously. The detained ones emerge, still wearing their human faces, but moving in perfect unison like pieces of a single organism. They walk toward the elevator, toward the upper levels, toward the unsuspecting world above, and behind them, from cell 43, something else begins to emerge. Something that makes the detained ones look like children playing at darkness. Something that has been waiting patiently in that sealed cell for longer than the Church has existed, waiting for the moment when the barriers finally fail. I wake from these dreams to find my room freezing cold, my breath visible in the air, and sometimes faint scratching sounds coming from inside my walls. I tell myself, it's nothing. I tell myself the nightmares are just psychological trauma from working in such a disturbing environment. But deep down, I know the truth. The detained ones are in my head now. They've found a way to reach beyond their cells, into the minds of those who tend them, and they're showing us what they plan to do when they finally break free. Yesterday, I found a new entry in the journal. The handwriting was mine, but I have no memory of writing it. It simply says, "Rule 5 is coming. We're not ready." I've requested a meeting with Cardinal Tossetti to discuss this entry, but something tells me he already knows about it. Something tells me he's been expecting it, and something tells me that the 4 rules we've followed so faithfully for so long were never meant to contain the detained ones forever. They were only meant to buy us time, and that time is running out. I still go down to the cells every day. I still follow the 4 rules with religious precision. I still work alongside Domenico, both of us maintaining our vigilant silence, our constant awareness, our careful adherence to protocols that keep us alive. But now, every time I descend those 6 levels, feeling the temperature drop and the weight of ancient darkness pressing in from all sides, I wonder if today will be the day the rules finally fail. If today will be the day we discover what happens when the detained ones stop being detained, and God help us all when that day comes.